Namaste, hello, good morning, good evening to wherever you are in the world. Welcome to NDTV World. I am Priyanka Deo, and today we have a very exciting guest on our show. I want to introduce her, and we'll get right into some questions. She's promised me she's going to answer some hard-hitting questions here. So here we go. Sanjyot Dunung is a single military mom and entrepreneur. She is running for Congress in Illinois' 8th district to bring, and I quote, common sense, responsible change to government. Sanjot, I think that's the need of the hour, if I may say that. Tired of chaos and not afraid to challenge the status quo, she champions real solutions that lower cost, that protect freedoms, that support families and communities, and also ensure a pro-legal immigration reform. She is also a very successful small business owner. She's an educator, a social scientist who has served on Joe Biden's foreign policy working group that focused on international trade and serves on the boards of National Small Business Association and the Truman Center for National Policy. Sanjot knows firsthand what it takes to create opportunity and jobs, to defend freedoms and democracy, and also to ensure dignity and security for all people. She is also endorsed by the Asian Congressional Caucus. All 20 members have endorsed her, and also the Hindu American PAC and Vote Common. So welcome to the show, Sanjot. It's a pleasure. It's really an honor to have you here, and I'd like to wish you in advance good luck on your run. It's
Thank you so much, Priyanka, for having me.
Absolutely. Well, let's get right into the questions because that introduction is power packed. So I mean, I'll just start off by asking, what are the biggest issues that you're hearing about from your voters? Your stance is people first. So what are the biggest issues going on, not just in Illinois, but I would say across the country?
Great question, Priyanka. And so I will say thank you so much. I am running here in Illinois, but for the last 7 years, I have been very heavily involved in helping with red to blue. I am a Democrat, but I like to say the common sense Democrat, really focused on delivering solutions and really sort of bringing the rhetoric down and the chaos down. That is something I'm hearing everywhere. No matter how people talked or voted last year, everybody's really tired. They're tired of the chaos. They're tired of uncertainty. They're also tired of sort of the very extreme partisan rhetoric coming from both the far left and the far right. So most people want to be able to just live their life. They want to know that they can afford the things that they need to take care of their kids, their parents, perhaps, make sure they have a secure job, afford groceries, their housing, save a little, take a vacation next year. Maybe they're going to go back to India. People don't want to be thinking about politics all day long. They don't want to be worried about whether or not the policies are making sense. And so I think that what you're seeing and I'm hearing everywhere I go is people have a heightened sense of concern. They wake up the next day and there's tariffs on a country. They wake up the next day and there's immigration crises going on somewhere. And I think it's that uncertainty and chaos that's highly destabilizing. So I hear a lot about, can I afford my life? Will my future for my kids, the American dream that I so strongly believe in, be there for them? And then number two, what kind of a future are we going to have as immigrants? And really making sure that we have common sense reforms.
Well, that's a perfect segue because how do you feel, as you said, it's headlining every single day, right? How is the current administration's approach? And you were part of the last administration in terms of you worked on Joe Biden's
Right.
committee, but the administration really dictates what goes on, right? How is the current administration's approach to trade, to tariffs, to immigration? How is it directly affecting your constituents? Do they have a reason to be worried at the moment?
A lot of them do, and a lot of them express themselves in different ways. And you're right, Priyanka. Each administration sets the tone, sets the values. And what's a value? A value is just what you prefer versus something else. So this administration is certainly prioritizing, if you will, the largest businesses. They're prioritizing tech and sort of insider world. As somebody who has championed, I've been an entrepreneur and a small business for most of my life, although I did start out as a banker. it's not a level playing field. And I think that I hear a lot from small businesses in my district, whether they're importing things and they're worried about whether the cost of their shipments are literally changing as the shipment is coming into the US, whether they're worried about whether their business is sustainable. You know, we have a couple of twin challenges happening simultaneously. We have a disruptive administration in terms of chaos of tariffs. It can change between breakfast and lunch, depending on what somebody's had for lunch.
And no one
And
knows
that's
what's
not any way for a business to plan,
yeah,
right?
no one
You
knows
can't
what the
plan the
outcome is.
future. You can't plan your tech, your
Yeah.
manufacturing, anything. But
Mhm.
we also have some geopolitical changes going on with China asserting itself on the world stage in different ways. We have tech disruptions. AI is an amazing opportunity, but it also presents a number of threats, both as a society but also to jobs, and really making sure that we have bridges. So, for example, I do hear a lot about people. I have a very sort of family oriented district, and I hear about it in my district and nationally. They're worried about their kids getting jobs. 12% of young people graduating from college are not getting jobs. They're not getting that first job. This is a problem as a society, as a country, as a global nation. That first job gives you that opportunity to professionally socialize, be able to get the skill sets that you need. So I have a few plans actually to address that. You're probably not surprised, but I think that we can address it, but we need to do it proactively rather than waiting for the crash to happen.
I agree. And I mean, a lot of things feel just as, I'm in the media, but I read the news as well. So just as a viewer and just as a citizen, and I've lived in Illinois my whole life, it seems that a lot of policy decisions that are made are reactionary. They're not getting to the root of the problem. So why are you, it's a blunt question, why are you running for Congress? I know you just said you had plans. What makes you fundamentally different from your opponents in terms of leadership and priorities?
Absolutely. So I'm running, even though I've been involved in the political ecosystem, more from a policy point of view. You heard a little, you mentioned earlier about focusing on trade policy, exports for small businesses, as well as foreign policy. But I'm a social scientist by training, as well as an entrepreneur. I really do study how do disruptions in business, trade, technology, and education impact all of us, our families, our communities, our nation, and our world. And I decided to run because I was really frustrated with what I consider the lack of common sense solutions. The problems that we have are big, but they're not insurmountable, but they really require workhorses, not show horses. And quite frankly, I feel that way too many people in politics these days are all about show horses. They're really peddling outrage, right? Outrage is great if you just want a bunch of clicks on social media, and I'm sure that being in the business of media, that's an important metric. But in Congress, the real important metric should be what have you delivered? What can you deliver? And I call it incremental base hits. You don't necessarily need to be able to transform everything all on day one, especially in Congress. It's just a 2-year role. But I'm really ready to hit the ground running, and I'm uniquely positioned to be able to do that because of the range of experiences. I've raised 3 boys. My youngest is in the military.
Awesome.
He's in the Air Force. He's going to be flying the C-17, so I'm deeply proud. I juggled a small business. I took care of my aging parents like so many of our families do. My mother was disabled, a rare form of muscular dystrophy. So I really get what our families are going through and what the challenges are for affordable childcare, elder care, disabled care, but also weaving in that policy expertise and weaving in that private sector. I'm the only one in my race who can bring all of these. And I'm the only one who's willing to say, how do we do things differently?
Mhm.
How do we challenge the status quo? And why is that important? It might surprise you, and maybe not. 40% of Congress are lawyers. I have a lot of great friends who are lawyers, love them dearly, but that's a little over indexing. And why does that matter? Because it's a mindset. Lawyers by mindset are really about containing, making sure that there's no leaky holes, making sure that it's a very finite. As a private sector person, as a small business owner, and we were honored to be recognized by Fast Company as one of the most innovative, small and mighty. And I wear that badge with a lot of honor. Uh, it's an innovation mindset. And what does that mean? It means you have a problem. The answer isn't, can you solve it? The answer is, how do we solve it? And that's the mindset we lack in Congress. None of my opponents bring that to the table. And quite frankly, most candidates in most races don't. And that's the uniqueness that I can deliver.
Yeah. Well, first of all, please thank your son on all of our behalves
Thank
for
you.
his service. I'm sure you're very proud. Uh,
Yes.
but let's take an example of what you're saying. There's a lot of, especially in Illinois, there's a lot of Indian-owned businesses,
Yes.
gas stations, motels, franchisees, IT contractors, right? They're struggling these days, especially with crime, with labor shortage, with rising costs that seem to rise every single day. Uh,
Right.
what concrete policy or policy recommendation or policies will you champion to sort of protect and support? I would say these already pretty well established immigrant owned enterprises.
So a couple in each of those areas. So let's talk for a moment about the job side. I have a plan to increase and expand public-private partnerships. It is something that we started under the former president's sort of bandwidth under Biden. And basically what that means is investing in vocational training, investing in apprenticeships, but particularly with small businesses and small, medium-sized businesses who want to see perhaps high school students who don't necessarily want to go to a 2 to 4 year college program to be able to come into a small business and learn as a vocational trade how we would pay for that, for example, because everybody needs a living, but small businesses want to train new workers, but they don't have the resources to be training grounds. We can pay those young people with the stipends that they would have gotten had they gone to a 2 or 4 year college degree. So it is not an increase in spending. I believe very strongly in being fiduciary responsible. We'll talk about the budget a little bit later. But we can do that, and we can also create pipelines for all these kids who are not getting jobs, make sure we match them with the small businesses. So that is one thing that I think we can do with all types of small businesses, Indian small businesses, but all without any constraints. The second is in terms of immigration. We know that both parties have dropped the ball on this for far too long. Immigration reform should have been passed 20, 25 years ago. We keep kicking the can down the road, and sometimes a little cynically, if I may add, it's because both parties think that they can own the voters if they don't solve the problem. So one of my platform issues is let us deliver comprehensive immigration reform once and for all. That means faster, legal, transparent pathways to visas, green cards, citizenship. No one should be waiting 30 years for a green card. Let's change the status. I know that there's a great deal of discussion around H-1Bs. We need workers, right? Whether you come under the H-1B classification, whether you come under anything else, unless you're Native American, every American is an immigrant, whether you came 4 years ago or 400 years ago through your ancestors. And that's our secret sauce. We need to welcome them. We need to make sure everybody follows the same rules and make sure those rules are easy to follow. We can do that by investing in judges and caseworkers. No one should be waiting more than a year. We can do background checks within 48 hours. Technology is amazing. Let's harness the very best of what we can do with technology and efficiencies to make sure we can fix immigration once and for all. The,
Well, can I just ask you a follow-up question to that?
sure.
Your stance is very strongly, and what sticks out to me is pro-legal immigration. Can you explain what that is to our viewers?
Absolutely. So, I think that there have been wide ranges of policy. So I firmly disagreed with President Biden's open borders. I don't think that that was the right way to do it. It disrupted border security, and we certainly want safe borders. We want safe communities. Going back to the small businesses, I would invest in making sure that there was more crime prevention and security and safety for those businesses. But what pro-legal immigration reform means is that we also don't want what's happened now, right? With ICE on every corner, ICE sort of disrupting our communities. If you have been legally waiting in line, which is what ICE is now doing, they're picking people up who are actually just have a number waiting for a visa, waiting for their green card. And many of the folks in our Indian community are also being impacted. That's wrong. I hear a lot from people about those concerns. We can take the same budget. It's 20 billion a year. We're funding ICE more than we're funding NIH, for example, cancer research.
Right.
That's a misset of values. We can take that same money, invest it in judges and caseworkers, make sure that there's legal, transparent, fair pathways. Everybody who is here, process them.
Mhm.
Either give them amnesty or process them with a visa within 3 to 6 months. There is no reason why within a year we can't get rid of the backlog. I've heard different numbers, but I've heard people are waiting for there's a 2 million backlog for Indians waiting for green cards because there's country quotas, which are outdated, which are stuck with the 1965 immigrant bill. We need to update those, right? I will also add one more thing. I'm the only one in my race attacking immigration head on. I think a lot of people are nervous about talking about immigration, and this is common sense, right? Let's use common sense. You don't want open borders, but you also don't want ICE disrupting your communities. There is a middle lane here. There is a common sense approach. And on my last note about immigration, and this is something I talk about in our community because we have a lot of older people, for a population to replenish itself, you need 2.2 children per family. America is down to 1.8. We don't have the tax base to be able to make sure that we can fund the programs, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and a number of other things. So we need immigrants. We need skilled and unskilled talent to come here, create your businesses, work very hard, be part of our community. We need to welcome them, and we need to make sure that everybody feels welcomed and supported.
Yes, absolutely. And you alluded to this, but maybe just a follow-up question to what you just said. It feels like, and there have certainly been media reports of identity-based targeting,
Yes.
especially of Indian Americans, young Indian Americans who are being educated right now in our schools and our colleges, and NRIs, not just in Illinois, but nationally. And I mean, I think most people, it's just common sense. Most people will agree with you that the ICE situation shouldn't have even been there. There's no need for ICE. There shouldn't have been a need for ICE to come into all of these cities in the first place. What specific steps, if you win, what specific steps will you take at the federal level to improve safety for Indian families, students, and business owners? And I'll expand it to
Right.
every group that feels threatened, that doesn't feel safe in their own city at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of levels where we're seeing, and it's changed dramatically in just the last 12 months, right? It's really, it's not just policy and it's not just ICE, although they're visual representations of the conversation that's happening. So we're allowing hate to become the currency for a great many people. And it's typically online, right? People like to,
Word
outrage
warriors.
is a
Word
strategy.
warriors.
And it works for the folks who are selling it because that's how they make their money. So on that macro level, and this is where I put my social scientist hat, we need to start making sure the tech companies are accountable to what flows through their platforms. And there's been a lot of talk about how do we update Section 230 for those who don't know what that was. Section 230 was passed in the 1990s. And it basically said that all the tech companies are great. And because they're in their early moments, we're not going to regulate them in the same way that we might regulate another utility. And I understand that. I'm an ed tech owner. My business is ed tech. So I understand technology and I love it. Well, fast forward, we know that Google, Facebook, Instagram, all of these, Twitter, have become very powerful platforms, which is great on one level, but there's no accountability. So we need to be in conversation with them to say we need better accountability. Let's say, for example, you wanted to print something that was slanderous or hate-filled in the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, Wall Street Journal. You couldn't because those papers can be sued. why are the tech platforms not also subject to that same level of liability?
Got it.
I think that that will go a long way in helping us clean up the online conversation. Because one of the realities are people say stuff online that they would never say to someone's face. I've been trolled online. My team can tell you the stuff that comes on our social feed, some of it's
Alarming. I mean, it's
gender, some of it's
unbelievable. Yep.
yeah, some of it's race, some of it's ethnicity, and people will be people. But what you want to do is take away the ability for people to get away with it. The second is strengthening the hate laws to make sure that people are accountable for it. And then when it comes to local safety, I would reallocate some of that ICE money to making sure that we're strengthening local police in each town and each district, right? We're paying a $50,000 bonus, taxpayers, by the way, to new ICE recruits. Why are we not paying that 50,000 to our local police departments for doing a good job and strengthening them with understanding how to identify hate crimes, how to work more effectively with communities from all different cultural backgrounds, languages, ethnicities, and religions, so that they can be better allies in protecting our businesses and protecting our homes. So I disagree with how this current administration has chosen to allocate its resources.
With that being said, the many Indian American families, I mean, I've had a few approach me as well, just on a personal level, but many Indian American families feel that their children, and you had an ed tech company you mentioned, so you
Right,
might relate to this. They face inconsistencies in DEI policies,
right.
in college admissions, and sometimes even at this point, whether it's online or even in person, bullying for their identity and their faith. Now, to me, I have been able to travel to India and back, even when I was young. So I did have the exposure to India. But my daughter, for example, is growing up in Illinois. She will only go maybe once a year, maybe, to India to visit her grandparents and come back. So my identity, I guess, or my formed identity will be a different version than her identity, right? Even if we follow the same faith. What is your plan to ensure fairness, equal treatment in schools and universities, and also to make sure that, as you said before, I think people are nervous to talk about issues because they're afraid of being bullied. So you can imagine our children and our minors in our communities. How will you ensure, or at least try to ensure, equal treatment? Stop bullying, get at its root cause that bullying someone for their faith or their identity is not okay. What's your plan to sort of ensure this fairness and equal treatment in schools and make sure that bullying, things like that, whether it's cyberbullying in person, it doesn't happen?
Absolutely. And I've been part of sort of education reform and talking about this from a cultural anthropologist hat for many
A
years.
mother. I mean, you have three sons yourself.
Yes,
So,
exactly. Um, I think that what we need to also recognize is that the way the current DEI framework was set up, it inadvertently, well intentioned, but it created a hierarchy of minorities. And Asians were at the bottom of that hierarchy, and it wasn't working, whether it was for college admissions, whether it was just access to government contracts. For example, my firm was also has a GSA schedule, and we're in that space. So I know exactly how government contracting works or how difficult it is. I think the better approach, and I distinguish the two between visible characteristics, which is our gender, our race, the things that you can see, and invisible characteristics, which are how we think. Maybe our religious preferences are not so evident, our values. We need to focus on our invisible characteristics a little bit more. I liken it a bit to an iceberg, for example. When you see an iceberg, you just see about 10%. It's the part that's coming above, 90% is below. And so the things that are actually in need of help are socioeconomic. You don't know somebody's bank account. And I think that if we start thinking about how to elevate people who may be socioeconomically disadvantaged, maybe they're first in their family to go to college, maybe they come from Maybe they came here, they weren't very well off, but they worked very hard. So their families don't necessarily have the resources. And by the way, we have a lot of those in our Indian community. You certainly hear about the wonderful tech successes, and bravo to all of them. But there are also a great many members of our Indian community who are not necessarily in that income stream and who are struggling, who need the Medicaid, who need SNAP, who need a number of those different things. So if we change the criteria, it begins to help. So we certainly want diversity by all characteristics, but it shouldn't be the lead quality. Indians by default, we tend to do better when we stick to merit-based, right? We are most immigrant communities, hardworking, education, parents exert a great deal of influence on their children. Perhaps there's a lot of faith, whichever faith you might be part of. We want to champion what people do well. So I talk a lot about family, community, and faith, and really making sure that we strengthen those. What can we do federally to be able to do that? I think we can put a lot more resources in community development, right? These are the kinds of line item grants that help strengthen families, and it also helps strengthen the different approaches that people might want to do. I believe that we do need freedom of religion. America's all about secularism. So every faith should feel welcome. Everybody should be able to practice their faith without any concerns, without any limitations. But we don't want it in the school, and we don't want it in our government, and we certainly don't want it in our laws. So to go back to your question for a moment about DEI, I think what we're ready for is the next version. The next version is, let's make sure there's diversity. Let's now start to take a look at those invisible characteristics, which is economic. And let's make sure that we refresh our model every 10 years, because there is this notion that once we've created a model, it should last forever. If we're doing a good job, a minority shouldn't need that help 20 years later, right? I've been around the block a little bit enough to know that today we call it DEI. 15 years ago, we called it multicultural. I'm sure in 15 years from now, there'll be another number or another name. The real question is, why haven't we solved the problem, right? Why haven't we solved? What are the structural issues that we need to be able to address?
US-India relations, when we're talking about structural issues,
Yes.
US-India relations they're actually at a historic high. I mean, US-India have never had better relations, and you see it between the two leaders of the two countries, between Trump and Modi. They hug every time they meet. What is your vision for, I know we have an ongoing trade deal. We're all kind of awaiting the results of what the outcome of trade negotiations are right now. But what is your vision for strengthening this partnership, US-India partnership, especially, and you mentioned it a little bit before, but in AI, in technology, in
Right.
trade, which is what the talk of the hour is, and also in defense?
Absolutely. So I think that India and the US have always had much in common. Um, very strong democracies, very strong secular democracies, even though there's dominant religions in both. So there is much to be proud of and a lot of shared values. I would like to see less erratic policies, to be honest with you, about trade. You can have friendly conversations with your friends to say, we want some adjustments. We need some adjustments in how you might be buying oil or how you do trade or tech. But those should be done in a constructive way to make sure everybody is building forward, especially when we're looking to India, for example, to be a counterweight to some of the manufacturing and supply chain development to counter the concerns about China trying to impose their world order on the world. We do believe strongly in a democratic, secular world order. And so we want to make sure that we champion other countries and allies who do the same. So I'd like to see more mutual respect on those issues, making sure that we're coordinated on supply chain, manufacturing. We continue to share, defense and national security. There's always been part of that sharing of information with India, Canada, the UK, and Australia. I would like to see that continued. There are a lot of new realignments in Asia. We don't know what, for example, China is going to do with Taiwan. So that is one disruption. And, as a military mom, I'm deeply proud of my son. I believe in a strong defense, but I'd love world peace because the last thing I want to do is see my son actually having to fight in a war. So this is personal. I have skin in the game. And I think that changes the conversation, by the way, because I'm the only one in my race with skin in the game as a family member. But I would also like to say that we're seeing disruptions with technology. I would like to see for AI and tech a global conversation, not just a national one. AI is amazing, but we need some guardrails. And it can be done under WTO, which is the World Trade Organization. There are some umbrellas at the UN. It just means that civil countries that have peaceful relationships will agree to some frameworks, and then their governments can then police outside of that. We don't want AI to be impersonating national leaders. We don't want AI to be peddling threats of hate in different ways, right? So we need to just sort of say what's an acceptable way for the agent level, and make sure that everybody agrees to that. So I would encourage those kinds of dialogues. As a member of Congress, I would actually vote to have some of those policies put into congressional record to say that we need a global and a national framework.
Right. Um, this is now, let's go to your campaign. I know you're campaigning very
Yes.
hard. It's a very successful campaign, might I add. So
Thank you.
all the best to you. Uh, can I ask may I ask an honest question?
Absolutely.
Uh, Indian Americans, and I've heard this personally as well, they often feel that politicians remember them only during an election season, just because it's a known fact that Indian Americans earn well above the average. They're among the most educated minority groups in the United States. So they have a lot of donation money, to put it in blunt words. How will you maintain consistent engagement with the Indian American community once elected? And I would say, what message do you have not only for young Indian Americans, but just our youth, because they're the ones getting exposed to AI, to all of the stuff that you talked about? What sort of message do you have for perhaps our young voters, or maybe even young people getting into the workforce who are interested or who want to enter public service?
Great question. And you are absolutely happy to answer a candid one. And it is one, right? We do know this. Um, for a variety of factors, Indians throughout the US have not been as involved in politics. I hear a wide range of reasons. Some people will say, well, it's the first generation, so people are much more focused on pocketbook issues, settling, making sure that they're grounded and they have their community. And I would say, bravo, we've done a great job on that.
Yep.
We're over indexed in success, so that is a terrific place to celebrate. We now need to make sure that that translates to power in DC and also all the way down ballot. So at the very, very local levels. Everything matters in every place, and it comes down to voting. Let's say, for example, and this is relevant in Illinois, where, by the way, for the first time in decades, no one can remember exactly when, we have four competitive primaries.
Mhm.
And a lot of people tend to say, "Oh, I'm going to vote. I'm going to vote in November." And the answer is no, no. Vote in your primary. Why does this matter? It matters for a number of reasons. Primaries, whether you're a Dem primary or a Republican, because they get very low turnout, the voices that win tend to be the most extreme activists
Mhm.
rather than the normal, average, everyday neighbors, the common sense solution, for example, that I'm offering. It's the activist, loud voices that win those very small. We need more turnout at the primary. So no matter what state people live in, find out when your local primaries are,
Right.
whether it's for school board, mayor, state or state senator or house, or federal offices for your Senate or for a congressional. Find out what the issues are. If you can get involved and you want to volunteer, wonderful. But a lot of people don't have time. Get that. Just find out what the issues are. These days with the internet, it's not hard. And make sure that you're informed enough to learn, how do I vote? When do I get registered? There's some mechanics, right? Make sure you have that opportunity. So certainly in Illinois 8, I hope to persuade people that I have the best platform, that I have the most unique perspective of lived private sector and policy experience. But no matter how you vote, I encourage everyone to get out and vote.
Yeah. And what message do you have for our young people? Because I know Illinois
Yeah.
especially is historically low in terms of young people coming out for primaries, for local elections and voting. It is maybe because I guess maybe a presidential election is very heavy in terms of media. There's a lot of headlines around it. Everyone knows when to go and vote, but there's not so much media messaging around or not so much popularity around the local primaries, right? Maybe election time, yes, but the primaries, no, not at all. What is your message for the young people out there, the first time voters, perhaps those that are becoming first time voters, or just voters who need to come out and vote, the young people in your community, in your state?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And let me give you a couple of stories and share those because I think they illustrate the answer to what. So certainly there's the mechanics of making sure that you can vote. But I have talked to young people who I understand feel very disconnected. They're annoyed with the current administration. They don't feel the Dems are offering them a path forward or a vision. And so as a result, they've checked out. I understand. I get it, right? I think that part of the challenge is we live in such extreme messaging environment that it's easy to say, I don't think anybody can deliver, and therefore I'm just not voting.
Mhm.
But to those folks, and I have these conversations every single day, Priyanka, I say, if you don't vote, this is your community. If you don't give yourself a chance to have a voice, it's not going to be a community that you have shaped. And every voice matters. Elections at every level can be won by one or two votes,
Yeah.
one or two votes. We're not talking, presidential millions. We're talking one or two. And I think that what I've been able to do with a lot of young people is help them understand that they do have a voice. And if they don't agree with the extreme voices that are out there, exercise your opportunity to show your voice. Go and vote. Learn who are the candidates. I'm very deeply touched and honored to have a bunch of young volunteers who have sought us out because they want this common sense lane, because they are tired of the rhetoric and they want deliverable solutions. I'm not promising them that I'm going to revolutionize the world. There are people who peddle in outrage and things like that. But what they see from me, and this is something I believe, is I can deliver on incremental base hits. And I think that more young people want to know, can you deliver? What will you deliver? How will you make my life better? So the public-private partnership that I mentioned earlier, vocational training, a lot of people really appreciate that because they're worried, where will I have a job? I
Yeah.
talk a lot about changing the poverty level standards. It's dated from like 1963. Let's bring it up to date in 2025 so you can get married, have a family, be able to afford childcare, housing, groceries, transportation. This is what I'm hearing from young people. I'm worried about how I can afford a house.
Yeah.
I have some ideas on how to be able to do that tangibly. That's what they want to hear and they want to know. So, to any young person who's listening to this, um, know your voice matters. You may think it doesn't online, but it does. And you might be the deciding vote in any election in your primary.
That's great, great messaging for young people, especially not just in America, but I would say around the world. Your voice does matter. And
Excellent.
you're absolutely right. In local elections, it's down to the wire on one or two votes most of the time. So thank you so much, Sanjot, for your time. I know you're very busy in your campaign. We hope to talk to you again at NDTV to see how you're doing and how your campaign is going. But thank you so much for coming. Viewers, thank you for watching NDTV
Thank
World.
you for having me.
Tuned and subscribe for more. Thank you, Sanjot, and good luck, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. And I'd be happy to come back anytime. I enjoyed our conversation.
Until next time, this is Priyanka Deo for NDTV World signing off. Namaste.